Now on Atlanta News First, this is Campaign 2024 special coverage.
And welcome back to Campaign 2024, your election headquarters right here at Atlanta News First at the First Alert Desk. Thank you for joining us. I am Maria Moreau and joined by a familiar face you might see every Tuesday here at the First Alert Desk, our partners at Decatur-ish, Dan Wisenhunt. Dan, you are really on the ground in DeKalb County following everything that is happening out there. So I want to start by getting a check with you of how polling is going in really one of Metro Atlanta's most fast developing, largest counties.
Well, thank you for having me on today. It's a great day. Elections are always my favorite thing to cover. There's always a lot happening. It's always a long day. So as we've reported, as y'all have reported, Atlanta and Georgia have seen amazing turnout in the early vote. So as you might expect, that's having some effect on what we're seeing at the polls today. Polling is moving pretty briskly. We're not seeing a whole lot of delays in DeKalb County. Zoe Seiler, our assistant editor, is out and about with our photographer, Dean Hess. Zoe said that there appeared to be a higher than normal turnout in places like Avondale and Clarkston, while turnout in the city of Decatur has been a little bit lower. And just kind of reading between the lines, we think that maybe there were people who were more able to early vote in Decatur than in those locations. So that's what we're seeing. We haven't seen a whole lot of drama. There was something in Fulton County, and y'all covered it. And Appen Media is going to cover that as well. Fox News was apparently out in Dunwoody, had a drone flying over, so we'll see what that's about. We've so far though nothing too major going down. I will say, and for those of you who are not in the press, we have been to a lot of different events. I went to a rally for Kamala Harris and Walls the other day, and then I went to the election machine Q&A in Fulton County. And our team even today has noted the amount of foreign journalists that are here covering this election from all over the world. And I don't know if anybody has done a census on that or taken an inventory. But if I had to guess, the last time we had that many foreign journalists in our neck of the woods would probably have been the Olympics. I'm just guessing. Maybe there's something more recent than that. But it just kind of goes to show you and everyone that the eyes of the planet are on what's happening in Georgia right now. Everybody's wondering what we're going to do. Everybody's wondering how we're going to go because of all the drama that happened in 2020. There's been a lot of stops by both candidates here over the last few weeks. Georgia has gone from being a reliably red Republican state to being a swing state in about 4 years. So it's a very interesting turn of events here in Georgia. A lot of people are interested in what we're doing. If you caught 60 Minutes on CBS, they had a big feature story. A friend of mine, Gabriel Sterling, works for the Secretary of State's office. He featured prominently. And a lot of people who are election experts point to Georgia really as a model of how elections should operate, despite the conspiracy theories and things you hear about how we do things. So that, in a nutshell, is what we're seeing. The usual shenanigans, people waving flags and signs. There were some apartment knockers in Dunwoody, people trying to shake the bushes a little bit and get some voters out there. The Dunwoody Democrats were on that today. So a lot of moving parts, a lot of things going on today. So far, knock on wood, You
haven't heard any issues?
I haven't heard of anything major. Computers are part of this process, so I would not be shocked if there's a problem with a machine or something like that. Technology fails us, as anybody who works with technology knows. So wouldn't chalk that up to any kind of a conspiracy. That's just the way technology is. I think what we're seeing here is the impact of that amazing early voting turnout we had is making things operate a lot smoother today at the polls at the ground level. So I think we're seeing that play out.
To talk about that for a minute, I mean, the early voting record, not just in specific counties, but across the state, was historic. I mean, even the Secretary of
Yes.
State said he's never seen anything like this. DeKalb County in particular was an important one we kept an eye on because of the amount of people that are there. I did want to talk about the races on the ballots in DeKalb County specifically. Not too many of them, but this past year, have had an interesting, really transition team announced, and that is the DeKalb County CEO winner that was named earlier.
Yeah, there are quite a few local races on the ballot, especially at the state and legislative level. We're not following all of them in deep depth, but we're keeping an eye on them. So let's just get the easy stuff out of the way. Uncontested races. Sheriff Melody Maddox, unopposed, going to be reelected. Irvin Johnson, tax commissioner, same deal. I don't believe either of them had any primary opposition. DeKalb County had a very contested Democratic primary for CEO, and we had a runoff. Ultimately, Commissioner Lorraine Cochran Johnson prevailed. She has no opposition today. So after today, barring some crazy write-in thing, we fully expect her to be the commissioner-elect. Same with Shakira Johnson in District 4. So that's the easy stuff. That's the stuff that's not contested that we know is what the outcome is going to be. The stuff that is on the ballot in DeKalb County that is local are the District 3 and District 7 commission races, and that is a fallout from the CEO race because the District 3 Commissioner Larry Johnson and District 7 Commissioner Lorraine Cochran Johnson both left their seats to become candidates for DeKalb County CEO. So I just want to kind of walk us through the District 3 real quick. We have 4 candidates in District 3 and District 7. Interestingly, and this is real in the weeds, but that's how we roll in DeKalb County at Decatur-ish, this is not a primary election. Ordinarily, when there's a commission election in DeKalb County, it's done through a primary process. But this year, it's just a straight-up special election, no party affiliation involved. So there's not going to be a primary. There will be a runoff if there's no candidate gets over 50%. The District 3 candidates are Nicole Messiah, Tommy Travis, Jakelyn Walls, and Andrew Bell. We moderated a forum for them with Leadership DeKalb. You can find coverage of that on decaturishvotes.com, where you can also find our voters guide. District 7 is going to be candidates Demetrius McCoy, Jacqueline Adams, Kenneth Royal, and Ladina Bolton. Interestingly, in District 7, Demetrius McCoy works for Commissioner Merida Davis Johnson. Commissioner Merida Davis Johnson is the wife of Hank Johnson, who is running for re-election to the United States Congress today. So that is a contested election on the ballot. He has a Republican challenger. We'll get to that. He is running against Eugene Yu as a Republican in that race. District 5, Nikema Williams is the incumbent. That's John Lewis's former seat. Her Republican opponent is John Salveson. So those races are on the ballot today. We just got a ton of stuff. We've got State Senate District 10. The Republicans ran a lot of candidates this year for some of these state legislative races. DeKalb County has had an all-Democratic legislative delegation for a while. I don't really expect that to change, but I do think the Republicans are back and sort of testing the waters and making some of these races competitive again. The races that I'm following are State Senate District 40 with Sally Harrell, who's the incumbent, and Amelia Sierra Momoa. We have Jeff Newland and Kim Jackson in Senate District 41. As you'll recall, we had Kim Jackson join our show a few weeks back. We invited her Republican opponent to join us. I believe one of the races, he did join us actually. Yep. My bad. Jeff Newland, and we had Jeff Newland and Kim Jackson. It was another race where we didn't have one of the Republican candidates show up, but it wasn't that one. I'll try to remember it in a second. House District 80, we got Brian Anderson and Long Tran. I'm just going down the list here at this point. Imani Barnes is an incumbent. She's running against Dr. Barry Zitzholtz. Imani has had an interesting rise through politics. You know, she was a Tucker City Council candidate,
She lost that race and then ran for state house and was elected. In the last couple of years, we've had this sort of wave of outsider candidates getting into the process, people that you might not have traditionally seen at these party functions, and the farm system that usually brings candidates to the fore. So that's been really interesting story of the last few years is more outsiders. Maybe that's an effect of the Trump phenomenon. He's an outsider as well. People jumping in and saying, you know what, I'm just going to try my hand at this and see what happens.
It's interesting. You're talking about DeKalb County, and you have covered DeKalb County and lived there for such a long time that you've got to see this, these ballots over and over again. What stands out to you this particular year?
I think the county commission is definitely a turning point election for this county. We've got a lot of... So, to back up, DeKalb County has had CEO Michael Thurmond for 8 years. And the leadership stability, there hasn't been any major scandals or corruption or anything like that that has come up. And that's really to Mike Thurmond's credit. He's a career public servant. Probably, if we're being honest, overqualified to be DeKalb County CEO, but he ran and...
I've never heard that.
Yeah, he is definitely... He was a labor commissioner at one point. I mean, Mike Thurmond is very realistically a candidate for governor, and I think he ran for Senate at one point. Mike Thurmond has been at the helm of DeKalb County government for 8 years, and over the course of time, that has changed in some ways how people perceive DeKalb County. It's going to take a long time to discard the baggage of years of scandal and mismanagement. You can't do that in 8 years. But I think Mike Thurmond brought a level of stability that made people a little bit anxious to see what could happen if there was a really big change candidate. And I think that's what Lorraine Cochran Johnson represented, is that, the status quo is, even though it's better than it used to be, is not okay. And that was what she ran on, which was a little bit of a departure from what the other candidates were running on. Their message was more or less not as... radical's not the right word, but Lorraine Cochran Johnson definitely ran on a platform of things could be better than they are. And she ultimately prevailed. I think Steve Bradshaw coming in a distant third was a shocker to a lot of people, if only because Steve Bradshaw felt the most in the mold of Mike Thurmond in terms of demeanor, in terms of his approach to governments, in terms of the network that he had built. But it just goes to show you that people didn't want to maintain the status quo. The status quo was not good enough. They wanted somebody who was going to push DeKalb County forward on some of these critical issues. And honestly, that's always been the big knock about Mike Thurmond, is that even though he brought a lot of stability to DeKalb County government and he ran a very clean, ethical administration, he didn't make a whole lot of headway on these. He inherited a mess with the water system, and he's leaving us with a mess with the water system. Now, is it fair to put that all on him? No, it's not. It's a complicated problem that came about due to years of neglect from previous administrations. But there was a strong sentiment when he came in that DeKalb County really needed to clean house over at DeKalb Watershed. Mike did not do that. In fact, one of the first interviews I did after he got elected is I asked him point blank, why are you not going to just come in and clean house at Watershed? And Mike said, I'm not that kind of leader. That's not what I do. I want to work with the people that I have. And that is a small example of, I think, his leadership style. Mike is a very collaborative person. He doesn't like to just get rid of people. That there are arguments that's not a bad way to be, but I think when people are frustrated with the status quo, they want to see accountability and they want to see change. And I think that is really what Lorraine Cochran Johnson represents. Now, what's interesting is that they're trying to get this water rate increase passed before she takes office. I predict that that's probably not going to happen. They're probably going to wait until they have new commissioners seated before they pass the largest water rate increase in history. but I do, well, maybe not in history, but it's the longest one in a while, and it's
big
needed.
impact on DeKalb County residents. That's
Right,
for sure.
it's going to have a huge impact. I think that, so we'll stick a pin in that. You know, the county leadership, these problems that have been with us for a while, to Mike Thurman, things have been so stable under Mike Thurman that we have forgotten how wacky it was. The previous CEO went to prison and got out of prison. It was as bizarre as it could be. And over the amount of candidates that we had running that were just solid candidates across the board, that's different. That's different for DeKalb County. A lot of times you'd have these elections and you'd ask yourself, why is this person running? They don't have a chance, or they've got a lot of stuff in their background that doesn't seem to make them qualified for these jobs. But almost across the board in DeKalb County this year, we had really strong candidates, and that's a good thing for DeKalb County long term. So that's what's going on with the county commission. Now we got a school board that is going to be new. That was settled in the primary in May. Even though it's not a partisan election, they elect the school board members back in the primary election. So we're going to have a whole new school board coming in. We're going to have, and we'll talk about this in the what's next for DeKalb County. But I think people are also dissatisfied with the status quo at DeKalb County schools. Same deal. Although I would say, unlike DeKalb County government, the schools have been a lot more mired in scandal and controversy and dysfunction than the county government has. So those are the two real big trends that I've seen, is this: people have seen things get better and they're anxious to see more, and they're anxious for our leaders to do more. And I think the results we're seeing reflect that.
You actually had Miss Lorraine Cochran-Johnson here on Decatur Dish shortly after she actually won her primary, and you asked her point blank, what are your legislative priorities? And she just echoed what you said about how change needs to come to DeKalb, and there are a lot of areas that she wants to address the moment she steps foot in office. So walk me through that, a little bit of that conversation, because it really starts there, and then we start to see the different legislative parts of DeKalb kind of move forward with her.
Well, she's going to want to put her own leadership team in. I do not know. I do not have a good read on how much onboarding has gone on for her. I don't think a lot of people in leadership in DeKalb County, I think they all thought it was going to be Bradshaw or Larry Johnson. I don't think they expected her to do as well as she did, but she just went out there and outworked everybody. One of the things that Lorraine Cochran-Johnson did is that no matter who you were, even if you did not live in her district, if you emailed her or called her, she would return your phone call. And that counts for a whole lot more than people realize. She's going to have to get a team in there who is going to need to overcome some of the cultural dysfunction and inertia that it is in DeKalb County government. And frankly, it's going to be a little hectic for a while. There are some serious issues in DeKalb County, particularly within the permitting process. They just changed over how they handle permitting for vendors, and people are still getting onboarded to this. So of course people are expecting to get paid that are running into problems with that. The business licenses have always been a big problem in DeKalb County. It's always been hard for people to get the licenses and permitting they've needed. Public safety, that's something she talked a lot about. How are we going to attract qualified people to work at DeKalb County Police? Everybody in the news media knows how difficult it is to work with DeKalb County Police. That's not a knock on them. They are short-staffed. Oftentimes the people who are doing PIO work are also out there patrolling the streets. So how are we going to attract and retain a high-quality police force here in DeKalb County? She's going to have a lot on her plate as she takes office. And Marjorie Hall was here with DeKalb Strong. One of the things that we both talked about, and what is going to be the big challenge for her, is how well she delegates, how well she hires the right people. Because while it's wonderful when you're running for public office to answer every phone call that you get, at a certain point,
you're not going to be able to get stuff done if you're doing that. And in fact, I've got all their cell phone numbers just because I've been in DeKalb for so long. But I called Lorraine Cochran Johnson, and she answered it, first or second ring. And I said, LCJ, I call her LCJ sometimes. You're going to have to hire somebody to take your phone calls at some point. You're not going to be able to just take phone calls from any old goober in the press. And she said, I know. So it's going to be really interesting to see how she delegates, because I don't know that she is, that is her natural inclination. And I sympathize. It's not my natural inclination to delegate either. But she's going to have to do that to be effective at leadership. So those are the things I'm kind of watching from her. From the new school board perspective, I'm really interested to see how they work with the superintendent, because they didn't hire him. They might come in and have their own priorities as well. They just extended Superintendent Horton's contract through 2 years, I think, to take that kind of a discussion off the table. So a new board comes in, that's not the first thing they're working on. So generally those things. We can go into it a little bit more, but that's just to answer, long-winded answer to your question. That's what I'm looking at.
So fair to say that Decatur-ish and everyone on your team will have continued business covering the legislation and the new leadership that's in DeKalb County and telling their stories. I do want to just talk about the voter in DeKalb County for a moment, because we are still hours away from polls closing at 7 p.m. As long as you are in a line at 7 o'clock, you can still go and cast your ballot. You just have to physically be in line at your specific polling location. So I'm going to throw up this website here for a moment, and you can see this is where you go. It's My Voter page.
Why hire Montlick
Secretary
after
of
an
State,
accident?
My Voter page.
Research proves
And
that
I
injured
apologize,
people...
we have some audio interruption there. But it asks for your first initial, your last name, your county, and date of birth. That's all you need to give. It's very easy. I'm sure all of you know that information, and it will tell you where to go. Now, as far as showing up at the polling locations, and Dan, you actually early voted, so you have your own experiences with this. You bring your ID or a valid government ID, a passport, something that is, accepted to bring to a polling place. And you, most importantly, you put your phone in your pocket and you proceed to cast your ballot. So
Right.
a couple things, making sure that you don't have any wording that shows support for a particular campaign on your t-shirt. They will not let you inside if you're wearing anything like that. Any political messaging is not allowed within 150 feet of a polling place. With that being said, Dan, for the DeKalb County voter that is listening to this and deciding to go out and cast their ballot today, what do they need to know and think about ahead of showing up at their polling place?
Just get out and vote. The process is pretty easy. I think all the things you touched on are just common sense. If you go vote, act right. Y'all know how to act right. I mean, we all know how to behave. This ain't rocket science. Just go out there, bring your ID. That's the most critical thing.
Don't forget your ID.
I think. And if you did not get an absentee ballot, we have had this come up. People have requested their absentee ballot in the mail. They may not have gotten them. You can still vote. You just got to go to the polling place to vote. And if you are disabled, if you have any kind of issues, tell the poll worker and they can help you with that. You can still cast your ballot. They keep a record and they'll know if they mailed you a ballot, so they'll cancel the absentee ballot that you didn't get, and you'll cast your ballot in person. So that's one thing that's coming up that we've heard is that, and everybody's heard about these problems with the mail system. So if you are a voter and you wanted to vote absentee but you didn't get your ballot in the mail, go down there, go vote. If you can get down there, go vote. If you've got a disability, tell a poll worker. They'll help you cast your ballot today.
We were talking earlier this morning about how important the Georgia vote is. Georgia is one of the swing states in this election, and it really, your vote will go a long way. I did want to talk about the voting process, because a lot of people will say, I don't want to stand in a line. It's the middle of my work week. I don't have time for this. What was your process like early voting? I know you and I both kind of had to take care of that ahead of time because we had to be here today.
Sure.
But walk me through that process.
Went to the Clarkston Library, gave them my ID, filled out the absentee ballot form, and voted. It was really simple. There was no line, there was no waiting. The poll workers were happy to see us. I want to give a shout out to the poll workers for just a second, because they are on the receiving end of a lot of really nasty abuse, and they do not deserve it. Our poll workers are, in my opinion, some of the best citizens we have in any county. in Georgia, and God bless them for being out there and helping to facilitate this process. I just want to give a shout out to them. The poll workers I encounter at my polling location when I do vote on voting day and at the county offices are all fantastic,
and they're
wonderful
excited
to work
to
with.
be there.
They're excited to
They're
be
so
there.
present.
They're helpful. If you have any problems whatsoever, talk to a poll worker. They're there to help.
You know, I don't live in DeKalb County, unfortunately, but Fulton was right along with how you described it. In and out, quick and easy. I think I was there for 15 minutes, and that's just because I had to triple check my ballot, make sure that I was marking everything off the way that I practiced at home. Decatur actually has a sample ballot, if I'm correct, that you can review for a better understanding of what you're going to expect when you get there. Now, I'm not going to ask you what you voted on, but when you got to your to cast your ballot, walk me through that process. Was it pretty seamless? You knew the questions ahead of time. Was that an important part of your speed at being able to cast your ballot as quickly as you did?
Well, we did the vote. I helped write the voter's guide, so that helped. I was a little more up to speed on a lot of the issues. There are a lot of complicated sort of tax questions, the homestead tax exemption. But as far as the process, they gave me the card. I took it to the machine. I went boop, boop, boop for whoever I was voting for or whatever I was voting for. I was tempted to do write-ins on the uncontested races, but I couldn't get creative enough, and I wanted to get out and go have dinner. So I didn't do that. You shouldn't waste your vote like that. Don't do that. But every once in a while, I'll get a little mischievous with the uncontested races. But I marked my ballots, and I handed them the card, and I got a sticker. I didn't get any of the fancy stickers like they have in DeKalb County. I've started to see them out in the wild. We got the traditional I voted sticker, but I've got a whole wall full of them. I've been collecting them for at least 3 election cycles now, and hope to collect them for many more.
It's a good
Couldn't
feeling.
be easier. It
A
is
tiny
good feeling.
sticker can put a
Let
lot
me
of.
ask you a question, Maria.
All right, go
You're
ahead.
always asking me questions. Let me ask you a question. What do you think about voting? Because you've got a pretty unique story when it comes to voting. Why don't you tell us your story?
Yeah, so I am a naturalized citizen, so I could not vote up until 6 years ago. So it was very exciting to be able to cast my first ballot, and I cast it in my home state of Hawaii. And I did all my research. I actually studied political science in college, so I'm a little enthusiast of political history and my local government. And it was honestly a fun process. You get to the ballot and you feel like you're part of something, and you feel like you're doing your civic duty. It's a very good patriotic almost feeling, especially for me. I do feel like I was very intentional about wanting to be an American citizen. So getting to be able to be part of that process and being welcomed by poll workers, I mean, it really does, if you're going to do one thing today, do that, because it really does go a long way, and you get to be a part of something larger.
I have heard from my team today. They've encountered people who are just like you, who are naturalized citizens, and I'm always touched when I hear the stories of naturalized citizens who are excited about voting, because I feel like some people in this country are very blasé about it and they take it for granted. But people who want to be, first of all, anybody who wants to be a part of this wacky country, God bless you. We love having you, but we got some problems. But it is always genuinely touching to me to see people who are excited to vote for the first time, who are excited to exercise those rights. And it sort of underlines the frustration that I feel when people don't vote, when people don't participate in the process. You want to know what I've been thinking about today?
What have you been thinking
I
about?
have been thinking about the Roman Empire. No, I've been thinking about the Civil War. And I feel like it's a weird tangent, but bear with me on this. To understand the political history of this country so much, like the Civil War is where the timeline splits.
Dan, I don't have a graphic for this.
You don't have a graphic. Just put Abe
Go
Lincoln.
ahead.
So in 1864, things were going very, very badly. It looked like the Union was about to lose. It looked like Abraham Lincoln himself was about to lose. And there was some thought to suspend the election that year because they'd suspended so many other things. And at the time, President Lincoln said, no, this is really what this war is about. So even though he was likely to lose, and even though the Union was on its way to defeat, they held a democratic election in the middle of what is arguably one of the bleakest times in our country's history. And they kept faith with one of our
most essential institutions. And when I see the turnout that we have seen in this election, both in early voting and on election day, it gives me hope, because the amount of rancor and the amount of insults and harassment and disingenuous arguments that have been thrown at our electoral process, you couldn't blame people for thinking, I don't want to get involved with that. But it is nice to see that once again, even for what many people, this feels like a bleak moment in our history as well. It's nice to see voters still keep the faith with one of our most essential institutions. So it means a lot to me from, well, thank you. I appreciate that. I can have my moments. But yeah, I thank you to everybody who's voted today. If you haven't voted, get out there and go vote. Polls are open till 7. I wanted to say on the polls, occasionally they will extend the hours if there's like a long line. So don't be surprised if we see some announcements that polls are open till 8 or 9 or so. So there's that. Follow Atlanta News First for all the live election results, and follow Decaturs.com for all the live election results. We'll bring you that at 7 p.m. after polls close.
And with that, we will be continuing to bring you wall-to-wall coverage as we look across Metro Atlanta and Georgia to see the outcome of the presidential race and many of the local races we've been following here in the Peach State. Stick with us. We're going to take a quick commercial break, and we'll be right back with more.
First before every storm, protects you with every investigation, and looks for all sides to every story. Atlanta's only locally owned news team is Atlanta News First.
We might be new, but we were built here. That means more breaking news that matters, more first alert weather helping you plan, and more honest reporting so you can make up your own mind.
The news you watch should be clear about their agenda.
At Atlanta News First, our agenda is you.
Your home for the best local election coverage is Atlanta News